I got a whole setup. I have a little this is my little flower wall, my
Right,
flower vines.
right. Well, people have to, they have their different ways of dealing with the background, right? So, anyway,
All
Seeing
right,
that.
so let's
I
continue
picked the
on.
most aesthetically pleasing part of my house.
yes, it is. It's very nice. It's beautiful, in fact. So, yeah, I'm sorry that we were late, though.
No worries.
Yeah, I was just concerned that I missed it.
Right. No, it was because that's why I see sometimes we've been early. It's not, you know, but it's not the norm. So usually about 8:30 is the norm, but sometimes we're later than that. And this means we were starting from 7 o'clock trying to get it together, and it only tapes. So just to let you know, we'll be taping for just under an hour. So because of the radio show, that keeps us honest, so that we do limit it to less than an hour. And there's a little clock that you'll see actually on the screen. So if you're wondering how much time we have left, so I'll leave it when there's a couple of minutes. And just a reminder too. So what will happen is I start off with some intros, which are basically, thanking our producers and our WBNY, etc. And then some welcome and intros, a little Ganonio, like a mini Ganonio, then introducing you both, and then we'll do a little thing on values, and then we'll get into the issues. The sort of the way we let it out, but it's very organic. I wrote it up that way partly so that, like I was saying, if somebody doesn't watch or listen to the show, that they would still get some of the information. So, yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. So here, let's see. And I think the two of you, it's so nice because both of you have your own things. Just from my experience in that meeting, that it's very complimentary on covering the whole thing of what we're talking about here. So, and I do not want to mince any words about what we need and why we need it. So I'll be very plain about it myself. Actually, I take it as a brand of honor that, because I've gotten criticized at times for being a little wussy, and yet I was on the, after one radio show, somebody said to me, "Boy, you'll say anything, won't you?" Well, I won't say anything, but I'll say what I think, though.
There you go.
And what I think is sometimes like, you've got to be kidding me. Because
I think we all think that.
it seems so obvious, it really is. And I want to compliment you, by the way, on that folder. That is excellent. And in fact, I'm glad I reminded myself that I have them with me. I have it with me.
Oh, the brochure. Good.
The brochure
Yeah,
is
cool.
very good. Very good.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
so are the action steps. So is the initial, the whole, I have all of it. Yep. So that's what I'm saying. I just made sure I was boned up on it a little bit before we have our show,
Sounds
Oh,
good.
and I did remind you about water. I know I did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's warm.
Do I have the names right?
Yes, you do.
Okay, can they see the names?
Yes.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay, good. Can they see the timer?
Can you see the, yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
So it's the timer now. We do have a little 60. That 60 over there is the one that wasn't moving last time. But the
Don't worry
other
about last
one,
time. Let's
okay.
worry about now.
Okay, well, I'm just saying we can see the timer twice.
You
And
can see
one
the
of-
timer twice?
I can see the timer twice. See, it says 60.
I could also see the timer twice.
Right.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I was trying to talk
Oh,
about.
yeah. Let me get rid
So
of
it's
it.
the same one as it was before that won't move.
Right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
No,
Thank you for
sure.
explaining that to
Oh,
me.
sure. I was, yeah.
You wouldn't believe why that's on the screen.
I
You
would
wouldn't
believe it. No, I would believe it.
Because we have two engineers, me and another guy.
Uh-huh.
I insist on one kind of timer. He insists on the other.
Oh, well, I'm on
I
your,
don't think his works.
well,
As you could see, it didn't move.
it didn't work last time,
Right.
so I'm in favor of yours.
Yeah.
Plus, you're our producer, and you're here now. So
Okay,
that's what we're
so
doing.
we've got that. We have this, and I believe we are ready to start if you are ready.
Yep, I'm ready. You two
Okay.
ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so
All right,
we're
let me
ready.
take it.
Ready.
I'm going to take it to the countdown.
And that
There's
60
the
is still up
countdown.
there. The 60 is still up there, by the way.
Okay. You can start when you're ready.
Okay. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being produced here in Think Twice Radio at the home of the future, which is also the home of our producer and friend, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And we thank our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station at 91.3 FM. Thank you, WBNY and Buff State. So when I think of thankfulness, I think about our indigenous friends and how after attempted genocide and all kinds of violence, trickery, and just horrendous treatment, they are still filled with thankfulness and start every event or every day out with being thankful to Mother Earth, thankful for the water, the living water that is, water is life, thankful for all the plants, the medicinal and nutritional plants, for the people who know the plants, for the trees and the air they give us, for all the animals that help us in so many ways of just all kinds and every kind of animal life, and all the different beauty in our world, all the different formations and in our earth, sea, and sky. And of course, for the love that makes it all go round, and for our Creator. So then, after they're thankful in all those ways and listing and going through them, they would say, "This is the Haudenosaunee way." They would say "Nyahweh," and then the people say "Nyo." So I'll say "Nyahweh." You can.
Nyo.
Thank you. So I am very thrilled about the show we're doing tonight, because we are going to talk about community responders needed. Community responders are needed, and community responders in Erie County. So I'm very thrilled to have two women that I just heard plenty of wonderful inspiration from in a recent meeting, and they were willing to come on for us to talk about it today. So Achol Deng, who is a community activist. Hi, Achol. I'm saying your name right?
Yes, you're
Just
saying it right.
checking, just checking. And Colleen Christich, who is a senior policy research
Senior community researcher. Yep.
senior community researcher. Right. At our PPG Partnership for the Public Good, of which the Western New York Peace Center is a proud part of out of the many people and groups who are part of. So we love Partnership for the Public Good, and you too. So Colleen, both of you, Achol, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So,
Yeah, thank you for inviting us and for hosting this meeting.
oh, I'm so glad that we're talking about this, because I'm very charged up about this topic. So, so let us, before we get started in earnest, is just to talk a little bit about what are the values that you hold in mind when you're thinking about this topic of community responders. So we'll just do in sort of talking circle type of way. So we'll start with Achol and then Colleen, then we'll come back around. So
I mean, when I think of values, I think of just community policing, I think, is a safer alternative. Having a sense of community and knowing your neighbors and knowing the people in your community, and
Yes.
being able to have good trusting relationships, and also just mostly like honoring the dignity of people and responding to people in a very empathetic and compassionate way. And just mostly for Black and Brown and other disadvantaged communities and communities where we've experienced a lot of poverty and a lot of systems of oppression. I think that community policing and the community responders team, I think, is just a better alternative for people who've had very negative experiences with policing and just the criminal justice system as a whole. I think that Black and Brown, well, I know Black and Brown communities and communities that experience high levels of poverty are targeted. And I think that it's time to put an end to that. And if there's any small changes, like I'm all about making changes for yourself, making transformation in yourself, in your family, and in your communities. And I think just having a community responder team would allow for safer interaction and more trust building within the community.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's so many bits that you weave in there about the values of dignity and trust and community, and absolutely so beautifully put. Thank you so much, Achol. So Colleen, what would you think of?
Thank you, Achol, for lifting those up.
Yes.
Excellent values there. I think to add to that, at the heart of community responders is the value of care, and just recognizing that every single person has worth, no matter what position they might be in that day. Maybe they're experiencing a down point in life. Maybe they're in a crisis. Maybe they're not, at their best, but at the end of the day, they deserve care and compassion. And second, not and behind that, but along with that is mutuality and reciprocity, recognizing that could be any of us, that any of us can experience a crisis at any day, that might look like needing a helping hand. And with that mutuality and reciprocity, just thinking like, how would you want to be treated at the lowest point in your life, and what would you want to be met with, and that along with that the response that we're looking for isn't one just of top down, like medical provider reaching out and assessing someone and giving them, what they need, but recognizing that people are their own person, that every person has agency and autonomy and can contribute to their own healing and their own wellness. And so it's not a top down approach, but it's one really of just mutual respect and even relationship, a peer-to-peer relationship, rather than care and compassion and being just from a one-way interaction.
Well, thank you so much for that piece as well, because I think the way you describe it really, even as we're talking about the values, you're really beginning to form that shape that is the community responders team, and what we're looking to create here. And I want to hold up the values of truth and love, because first of all, because one of my very favorite quotes ever, which by the way, John Washington is the one I first heard quoting or saw quoting this, was Reverend Dr. King said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality." And so unarmed truth and unconditional love. So unarmed truth means we're not trying to hurt anybody, and we're not trying in any kind of way, but there are some truths that need to be told about what isn't working about the way we're doing things and how things can be done better. So that's the truth. And that's with all love and respect for everyone. We're not hating on anyone, but we're also saying when you see the results And, you know, the definition of insanity. So let's not keep doing the same thing that's not working. So anyway, so on that note, let's, as far as, you know, if I could just toss it to you, Colleen, if you want to just say, what is a community responders team? The way, you know, the ways it's very nicely described in this wonderful brochure, Community Responders for Erie County.
Yeah, absolutely. Community responders are a new type of first responder. So it's a fourth branch of first responder, alongside police, fire, emergency medical services. And then there's community responders in some communities. And what it looks like is it's a team of health professionals and peers. And so the health professionals are usually a medic, like an EMT or a nurse, and a mental health clinician, like a social worker or a counselor, and a peer, which is someone with lived experience, typically of mental health or substance use. And this team goes out in response to low risk 911 calls. So and typically related to mental health, drug use, homelessness, poverty, and other health and social needs. Low risk meaning typically where there's not ongoing violence, weapons, any sort of, you know, serious crime taking place. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it is. There's a lot more to it that we'll get into, but that's what we're talking about when we say community responders.
Well, thanks. And, you know, I want to say one of the things that I was just only slightly surprised that I know when the research was done on the 911 calls for Erie County, I thought it was over 90% that are calls that are unrelated to criminal activity. And I was wrong. It's over 95%. Over 95% of the calls to Erie County 911 are not about criminal activity. They're about health. They're about alarms going off. They're about, you know, wellness checks or other non-criminal related calls. So, I mean, there are a lot of times and ways that the police responding. I wrote an op-ed on this once, but about the fact that not only are police trained in ways that will escalate the situation when they're being taught that they have 2.5 seconds to figure out if the person's going to try and kill them or not, but also even if they're wonderful at de-escalating, say that's their specialty, and in fact somebody's telling me, oh, some of them are social workers, so say they're a social worker. Any social worker who is great at de-escalating people, if they are wearing a police uniform and have a gun on them, their ability to de-escalate is going to, be dramatically reduced, because their very presence in their uniform and with their gun is going to escalate virtually anyone. And I don't just mean BIPOC people, black and brown people, or indigenous, or LGBTQ, or women, but I'm just going to say in general, even police officers have told me that if they get stopped by a police officer, their alarm system goes up like that. So I just need to mention that fact. So Achol, do you want to talk a little bit about the peer element in the team? Why that peer element? I just love it so much. So if you want to talk a little about that, that would be great.
Oh yeah, I definitely I appreciate having the peer. And I think there's just certain experiences that if you have not experienced that you cannot really relate on. And as much as we would like to be sympathetic, to be really empathetic, I think that you would have to be able to relate to someone on a very deeply personal level. Right. Especially if with the mental health professional part, it is nice to have that so that that aspect is being taken care of. But I think just having someone who is non-judgmental, who has also experienced the same thing and can speak to you on a personal, I've also been through this level, makes a huge difference. And also with especially like substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
If you, like, we've all can agree that, you know, it is a mental health problem, it is a disease, but the way that drugs impacts people's lives, it's just something that you cannot really experience. And I think just a lot of the emotional parts of it, as much as like I've been in healthcare and I care about mental health and focusing on my mental health and ensuring the mental health of everyone around me, there's just certain things that if you've never experienced, that you cannot really relate to on a personal level. Even with being Black, I feel like if you're not a Black person or a person of color, you don't know what it's like to experience living as a Black person in America.
Right.
And sometimes a lot of the, even like language,
Right.
and just the way, there's just certain things that if you're a Black person, you can share that identity. People of color, immigrants, like there's just certain experiences that are very unique, and that as much as other people would like to relate to, I think it's you have to be able to be in those roles and experience that in order to really like understand where that person is at that moment. Or even I feel like for me, it just feels like less judgmental because
Right.
I also suffer with mental illness. And when I talk to my counselor, like I feel like they do understand and they can help me. But when I communicate with other friends who've been through the same things, it just feels like I can be more honest and vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
because I know that they can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also with substance abuse, I feel like there is a lot of judgment and shame, and there's a lot of societal like negative opinions about substance abuse. And I think it's just some certain things that it's better to have a peer,
Mm-hmm.
someone who you can feel like this is not a non-judgmental conversation. This is someone who is here to actually help. This is someone who looks like me. Especially one of the biggest problems that I have with policing is that there are officers who do not look like the community. The
Right.
same thing with the education system,
Mm-hmm.
where we're having the educators and the people who are in power and who are policing, they don't reflect the community.
Right.
So I think it's very important that a part of being a community is feeling like you are represented and that there is someone who is within the same, sharing the same identity as you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially with people we're having police officers who don't live in the community and they're not familiar with the people. Like just being within the community, it has that level of familiarity that you can't get otherwise.
Right.
So that's why I think it's really important just to have people who look and feel like you, where you
Right.
can feel like it is safe to be vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm not going to be judged. So I
Right.
think it's really wonderful to have peers. And
Absolutely.
also
And go ahead.
the second part of it too is like for the peer, I think that it's very healing, like especially for myself, it's very healing as a part, like I feel like it's part of my healing to know that I've overcome mental illness and that even though I struggle, it's something that is not an obstacle anymore. And then just people who have overcome things, I think it's also very healing for them to be able to help others along their journey.
Absolutely. Sure. That's so true. Colleen, what would you say about the peer element?
Atul really hit it on the head.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially around stigma, I think when we're specifically talking about mental health and substance use and poverty and homelessness, those are all very stigmatized life experiences. And if, I think we've made some improvements in those areas, but we still have a really long way to go. And one way that you
Yes.
can see that is when you talk about this subject, sometimes there's pushback around safety and like, whoa, don't we need a police officer with a gun to respond? What if this person is dangerous or violent? And that's because of the stigma around mental health, especially
Right.
And mental illness, making people dangerous and violent, which is not true. It's a myth. And research has shown that, repeatedly, but the stigma is persisting. And so I think the last thing people need when they're in crisis is to have to explain themselves to someone.
Right.
Exactly what you don't want is someone that's very well intentioned, but doesn't actually know what it feels like to be in your situation. Maybe they have a lot of knowledge, like I have my master's degree in social work, but that doesn't mean I know what it feels like to have, a mental health crisis. And there's a big difference between, knowledge and experience. And so what you don't want to add is another layer of someone feeling other or feeling judged or feeling like they have to explain to you what they really are experiencing. And that's exactly what a peer doesn't require from
Right.
someone else. They don't need you to explain yourself because they already know exactly what it feels like. And that's really at the heart of it, is like you might know everything about a situation, you might know what to do, you might know what the right thing is to do, but you don't know what it feels like until you've experienced it yourself. And I think that's the dividing line, really, between a peer and any other helper or helping professional.
Right.
So, and that's why it's a team approach. That's why we don't have just
Right.
peers going, or just clinicians,
Right.
or just medics, because really in a lot of other places where this has been done, it depends on the situation, what the person actually needs, the person on the team that person relates to, because like Atul was saying, like having a team that has a man and a woman and maybe somebody, gender nonconforming, or different races speaking different languages, or however diverse you can make that
Right.
team, the more likely you are to be able to relate to all the different people that team's going to encounter. And it's really important to feel like you are seen and understood by the person that's coming to try to help you. So yeah, so having a peer is essential, and having the team approach is really essential too, I think.
Yeah, and of course, I so agree and so appreciate the way both of you have explained that, and it's so clear. And I'd say the one thing that really, sings out to me is the trust, is for building that trust immediately. And that's where the team, it makes sense that the team can be different depending on who's called, what's the issue, because for the comfort of the person, and it's really about the person's needs. And I do want to say, lots of us social workers, and of course I'm a social worker too, have had mental health issues aplenty, or that's how we find our way, into this field of being wounded healers. But even that, it doesn't mean it's enough. So there's all kinds of ways and different aspects, and of course a lot of these things are all happening at the same time. So there'll be drug use, and because people are self-medicating with mental health issues that are related to poverty and extreme racism and all kinds of other things that have been piled on top of a person. So the other thing I want to say is, when we think about, the many times and ways that has gone so wrong. So, I'll let us go to the behavioral health unit in the Buffalo Police Department, for example. So, and now they created this, and it was all very well intentioned. And it's after numerous times where I'm going to say that, was it, oh God, I'm blanking out on his name now. Not
Was it Willie
Pito.
Henley?
Oh, I was going to say Willie Henley. That was the first one
sorry.
I was going to say. Willie Henley, who, as a homeless person, so you can speak to that one. But when I'm trying to think of, it wasn't Pito, and it wasn't. It was. Oh, what was it? He had a nickname. You know who I'm talking about? Anyway, there have been numerous examples of people in Buffalo and actually all over the country where people who there's been a small problem that turned into police killing the person because they were afraid, because they didn't understand, because they overreacted, and because then they say, well, I was afraid, or they were attacking me, or, and what we also know is that in police shootings, there are two different basic kinds of people that vast majority fall into. It's either a black unarmed man or a white armed man. Those are the two main people who are getting killed. So that just says, implicit bias, the racism is just rampant. And that is one of the reasons, so that with the training, with the people who are in there, doesn't mean everybody, but it just does mean that it happens, and it happens again and again and again. The other thing I want to say about the behavioral health, before we go into the other examples, is that the behavioral health team had somebody at the helm who went on in a racist way, and then was not able to, they were, I think it was an attempt to talk about racial issues, which is very hard to do and very important in this day and age. But the fact that it went so very wrong, and that people were upset, they were insulted, they were aghast, and then the fact that the police department I want to say 8 months or something roundabout, more than 6 months, were only this person was only making it worse. And so in the end, she was given, she was on paid leave. Of course, these officers in the mental health, two Buffalo Police Department officers, one an officer over 15 years, who were black people who were, just looking for some kind of acknowledgement, some kind of apology, and some kind of rapprochement. What did they get? Nothing like that. They got the opposite. And so it's turned into a suit because they cannot handle those things, because they don't have the skills to deal with the emotional, social emotional problems. So they're not the ones to do that. So let me just go back around the circle. So add in anything you want on that at all. Go ahead.
I think you had a lot of good points. I think you touched on a lot of things. One thing that I just think is important is just the importance, like with Willie Henley, is the importance of knowing the people in your community.
Yes.
And the importance of the police officers knowing the community in which they're serving. Like a lot of people who heard that story, or when that story came out, people were like, we know Willie, that's something that is within his normal behavior.
Right.
And even his family members, when they talked about it, they said that was within his common behavior. So it's kind of like, for me, if you're within that community and you know your community members, then you would know that this person is not a threat.
Right.
And also with the unarmed Black men, I just feel like with not even just Black men, I just think Black people as a whole.
Right.
Because I feel like it really excludes Black women, Black trans, and other identifying
Absolutely.
people, where we feel like you're a target just because.
Right.
And you don't even have to have a reason. And it's just because of race and about income and class and just coming from the wrong neighborhood.
Right.
Or even if you're driving a car that's too nice and it's unbelievable that a Black person can be successful. I just think there's a lot of inherited biases.
Right.
And that is just within the community, like within the policing departments, within the criminal justice system, within the legislative system as well,
Yes.
within the education system. When they're looking for people who are misbehaving, they're automatically focusing their attention on Black and brown people. And especially with being from Buffalo, it's really important to recognize that even with the top shooting, that the perpetrator had been putting out a manifesto and he live streamed it, and it had been something that was publicized. But because of where the focus for policing is, they focus on the unarmed Black people, whereas with the white counterparts, they're able to commit crimes because they're not having that focus on them. And that implicit bias is not helpful for the community at all.
Right. You're so right. You are so right. Colleen?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, everything that Achol said is right on. Also, combining that with mental health or disability just makes, Black people especially, and people of all races also so much more likely to be killed by police. Just highlighting that to add to what Vicky originally said is that it is estimated that 25 to 50% of all killings by police are of people with mental illness or a disability. So putting those two things together, unfortunately, is deadly, as we've seen. And we've seen, right here in Buffalo, you brought up a couple of people, Vicky, but also thinking about people who've died in the holding center because of being originally sent there due to mental health crisis. India Cummings and Richard Metcalf come to mind immediately. So it's not an issue that's far away or, just in the news. It's definitely something that I've lived in Buffalo for 10 years, and I can list quite a few people that have died or in police encounters or in the holding center during that time, sadly. So obviously there needs to be a change. I think just going back briefly to the behavioral health team, there are issues with it, obviously. Number one being the racism of the person who was in charge of it, maybe still is in charge. We don't know. BPD hasn't made it clear, how that situation was resolved, who's supervising the behavioral health team now. Outside of that issue of, individual racism, we haven't seen any evaluations or really seen any public data from that program. So it's concerning to me that Buffalo leaders and the police department are putting so much stock into that program. When advocates have pressed for lead most recently, there was the response, well, we have the behavioral health team now. If other policing initiatives come up, it's always like, oh, well, we have that covered. And just to be clear, I think the behavioral health unit is something like 6 to 12 officers and maybe like 6 clinicians that operate during weekday, workday hours. So while that might be a step in the right direction, hopefully it's a step in the right direction, it's A, definitely not sufficient. B, we don't actually know that much about what they do, how they do it, how many people have been served. And C, isn't sufficient, like for the need in the community. And like Vicky said, is still meeting people with a police officer, which doesn't need to happen. It just doesn't. There doesn't need to be a police officer at every situation. In fact, at most situations, they don't need to be there.
And they don't, and we don't want them to be there because, first of all, they have other things to do. That's another thing that's very, very well laid out in here. And we know they have other things to do, and they know it. But the other thing it makes me think of is well, first of all, let me just say, were you done? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Just the last thing I would say is,
what was the last thing?
Just the way that some other municipalities are approaching this is to have a spectrum of responses. So God forbid there's some mass shooting going on. Yeah, send police. Like that, right? As of right now, like that needs to happen, right? In the world that we live in. But a step down from that in a lot of other places is a co-responder model where it is a police officer and a clinician where if someone's having, a crisis and they happen to know that that person has guns in their house or is armed with a weapon, that co-responder team is usually sent. But then for the vast majority of calls where it's not violent, where there aren't any indications that it's about to be violent, and it falls into these categories of a health or social need, then you should just send health professionals. And that's what's being done in other places. So I just wanted to say that because I think too often it becomes an either or, and it becomes either a co-responder model or a community responder model. And in a lot of places, they're doing both pretty successfully. And so we could add this to the landscape of services in Buffalo and Erie County. There's nothing that's already going on that would necessarily need to be cut completely in order to start doing a community responder team.
Right. No, you bring up so many good points. First of all, it makes me think of one of the initial so-called successes of the so-called behavioral health team was when a woman had jumped out of the second floor window in the winter into the snow. She's not wearing pants. She's wearing, she has underwear and a t-shirt or something like that. No shoes, no nothing. So the police came, and they came with the behavioral health team. They had a mental health person. And when our friend came along the scene, she saw that there were half a dozen police officers and this one mental health person who's on the phone with whomever, presumably talking about what's going on. But it's the police that are surrounding this person who had a pair of scissors in her hand and standing in the snow for 2 to 3 hours in the snow in her bare feet. Now, and the police keep coming till they have like 10 or 12 of them. And then finally, on the big moment, they had their bowler wrap, which is like a lasso thing that you go like that, and it creates these little shooters not shooters, I mean, that create this like a string that goes out, and then these little hooks that hook in. So they hooked into her bare skin, and then they all tackled her at once and brought her down, and they considered that was a success. Now, that just hurts my heart. Because if that is the best we can do, when a person is upset, they're in the snow, give them some socks, give them a pair of shoes or something, give them a blanket or something, talk to them. But instead, the police, and they're all helplessly piling up, increasing the upsetness of the person, right? Just like they did with Willie Henley, when there's 2, then there's 3, then there's 6 of them following him. So naturally the adrenaline is going up. They're getting more upset. They're not de-escalating. And they weren't, they're trying not to hurt the person, but they did. That is not a success to me. And the mental health person was not in control. They're just there passively doing, and because they're there with a police officer, all that fight, flight, freeze that's going on at the sight of the uniform means it's not helping. So that was the one thing. And the other thing I really appreciate that you said is about the jail. And the fact that that's the same problem in a different location, right? About mental health. Even the sheriff said that the majority of people are in there for substance abuse and mental health issues. So they should not be in the jail, those people. They might need to be in a locked facility, right? There's mental hospitals, group homes, and other kinds of facilities where they can get the treatment that they need, and they're not getting it in there. And we know they're not getting it there. They're not even getting good physical health treatment, what to speak of mental health treatment. And so this pilot program that we want to see in Erie County would get people off that track of going into the jail because the police are arresting you and because they don't know what else to do, and because they refuse to actually implement the LEAD program, which, don't get me started about that, which they've been slow walking, saying we're doing it, and they're not doing it for some 10, 12 years of so-called doing it that means not doing it. So if we have a pilot program where people with mental health or health concerns get, treated by this team, one of the big things they can do is help them find treatment in other facilities, et cetera. And why don't you we'll do a go round on that, and anything else you want to add on that, HL, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think Colleen, I think she really spoke very well about just the need for comprehensive mental health care.
Yes.
I think it's just very important. And then also just to have a change to the system. Because when I feel like, especially with policing, it's a very much ego focused, it's aggressive, it's about enforcing authority instead of empathizing and having a compassionate interaction. Especially with like a police officer, you know, within our society, they are seen as a sense of authority, a source of power. And it's very easy to have that power be misused.
Right.
Yeah, and I think just within the Erie County Holding Center, it's a pattern of behavior. And it's not just one person or a few persons,
No,
it's
right.
a pattern of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're having the behavioral health team that is made up of the same people that are misabusing power and being basically the source of the problem, you're just rotating within yourself and like patting yourself on the back for feeling like you've successfully accomplished something. And I think it's just like with the community responder team, I just feel like with that, having that sense of like community and it being an alternative, I feel like a lot of people would be more likely to use that instead of calling on the police, because a lot of people don't feel safe calling the police because of all the experiences that we personally experience or that we've witnessed.
Right.
So I think people who need help should be able to ask for help. And I feel like a lot of the times it's made to seem like it's a moral problem, especially when the response to a mental health crisis is the police officer who is supposed to be enforcing the law. I feel like it's criminalizing mental health, it's criminalizing poverty. And when you're being put in jail because you're unhoused or because you're having a mental health crisis or you're having a substance abuse issue, it really criminalizes those things and making it a moral problem instead of just a health problem, a mental health problem, and a systematic problem of poverty. So I think with that, it really shifts the conversation from this is, especially when I see a police officer, you're usually not seeing police officers unless like something has happened, like usually like when I associate police officers with crime, because like it just is automatically in my mind that the police officer and the criminal justice system and the incarceration system, it's all in one. So I don't see that as a helpful like thing, whereas opposed to like mental health specialists or a peer, it has that even playing field of I'm not in trouble. This is not a situation where I feel like I should be in fear, because the reality of the situation is that police do kill unarmed people.
Right. Right. No, you're so right. And so beautifully expressed. Colleen?
Yeah, definitely. I think also it's just something that comes up a lot is, you know, people will defend police saying, well, this individual isn't like that, or this person, you know, did the right thing, or this person has the skills. And that's true, right? Some police officers do a great job in different scenarios. They have different skills, whatever. The point though is like, as an institution, the police are designed to enforce the law, and it's their job to be authoritative, and it's their job to use force to make people do stuff that they don't want to do in order to keep the community safe. And it's literally designed like that. That's not me like just saying that about police. It like obviously, right? We know that that's police know that that's their job. The community knows that that's their job. And so really it's like really a misapplication of a whole profession to then send that person that's trained to, you know, be authoritative, to take control of situations, to be aggressive and, you know, forceful when the situation warrants it, and then put them into this situation where the exact thing that person needs is a lower tone of voice, to be understood, to be talked to compassionately, to take a lot of time with that person, you know, not just like do something and move on, but police don't have that much time. So it's really like, I don't know, the analogy that came to mind when you were talking about it at the beginning, Vicky, is like, if you go to the dentist and you've had like terrible experiences at the dentist and you like lay down in the dentist chair and they're like, I'm going to give you a massage today, you're not going to be like relaxed, like
Right.
everything about that environment, about that person, about the tools is about, one specific job that you might have painful memories of. And even if that person is a wonderful person, you don't feel like comfortable and relaxed and like you want to get a massage from them. So like it's kind of the same thing. And the other beautiful part is we have people in our community already that have the skills that are necessary, that are great at these types of situations, that have lived experience, all that stuff. They're just not being paid to do this job. They're not being deployed in these situations. And really it's just a mismatch that we just need to connect a couple different dots and we can fix this. It's really like, It's not rocket science and it's already there. And all we really need to do is reconfigure how we, take calls and triage them to the right people and send the right people to the right place at the right time. So that's what's really beautiful about community responders to me, is because it's very practical. It's very efficient, and other places are already doing it and it's working out beautifully, really, really well. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Right. Well, so, and I know you've done some of the research on those other places. If you want to just give us a snapshot of any of that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about learning about these things. So one of the oldest model is in Eugene, Oregon. It's called Cahoots. That's the one that some people have heard of before. It's been around since 1989, and it's an EMT and a crisis worker that go out to a really wide range of calls because they've been around for so long. The community knows them. They know to call them in these types of situations. In 30 plus years of operating, there's never been a death or a serious injury on either side of the person, being responded to or the responders doing that work. They only have to call for backup from other first responders like less than 5% of the time. And even when they call for backup, it's almost never like a lights and sirens emergency call for backup. It's like, okay, we don't actually have the resources to help this person. This other first responder needs to come and, take them to the hospital or whatever it is. But it's very, very rare that there's any type of like danger that comes up. So that's the one most people have heard of. More recently, since 2020 and the uprising around George Floyd's murder, a lot of municipalities have started more recent ones. And so one of the ones is in Denver, Colorado. It's called STAR, Support Team Assisted Response. And that one is to clinicians, and they started with just 6 call codes. So check welfare, assist public, found syringe, a few things like that. And they focus just on the downtown area to start with. And I know in the first 6 months, they had over 700 calls, no injuries, no deaths, no arrests, and really, really good outcomes. Since they started in 2020, there was actually a scientific study of that program that found in the areas where they were operating, there's actually a 34% reduction in crimes that were related to those types of calls. So even in hours where they weren't operating. So what the study found was basically having the right responders come up and work with people and be the problem solvers in that community. Really, it decreased the amount of times that people were doing what we would call disorderly behaviors in public that are low-level crimes. So that one also really amazing results. I'll just touch on a couple more because there's a big difference.
Well, just briefly,
real briefly. There's one in San Francisco, and that one is the 3-person model. So it's an EMT, a clinician, and a peer, and they respond only to mental health crisis calls. San Francisco is a unique place, and they have quite a few mental health crisis coded calls. So they operate 24/7 across the whole city, day and night, 365 days a year. They've been able to get people housed. They've been able to get people into long-term treatment, get their benefits going. So really, like, people who were living on the streets for like 20 years have now been housed through this program. The last one I'll touch on is in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's called PAD, Police Assisted Diversion. And they are on the opposite end of the spectrum. They respond only to non-crisis calls through 311. So if someone calls 311 because someone's asleep on a bench in their backyard or something, they'll go out there and assist folks. And that's one where it's really this harm reduction approach. I think it's just to like people who are trained, like just people from the community that have the right training that go out and help to resolve some issues. So all that to say, it can look very different, and the way that this program operates should look different depending on the community that it's in. So it can be mental health crisis, it can be non-crisis sort of quality of life issues, or it can be a wide range. Like Cahoots covers all of those things, just because their community has built a strong enough support system for that program that it's this like reciprocal relationship. So it can look a lot of different ways. And what we'd like to see in Erie County is a model that follows the basic tenets that it's independent of police, that it's health professionals responding, that there's a peer involved, that it's linked to 911, but not only just through 911, but what that team actually responds to and what type of help they give really should be informed by the community where it's going to be operating. And so it might look different in Cheektowaga versus in Buffalo versus, North Tonawanda or whatever. The teams can and should look different.
So,
I could go on and on about
yeah, no,
this is very exciting.
Well, it is very exciting,
Yeah.
and I think I as I look around at us, look at Achal, when you're speaking or any of us, I mean, they're ringing all these bells because, it just makes sense. It just makes sense that, let's stop trying to put a square, a square, peg into a round hole. That the police are not made for mental health calls and for other calls. So when their training is all about be ready, for violence and engage in it if you need to, that is the wrong training for people who are having mental health issues, for substance abuse issues, for homelessness and poverty related issues. It's the wrong, and even if they're good at it, which some of them are, I'm sure that some of them are, at being sensitive or helpful. It's not what their training is, but maybe they have additional training. So even if they are, everything militates against it by the receiver. Back to why the peers are so important, and even back to what you said about peers. So mental health practitioners, that's not enough. We need peers. For the same reason that violence interrupters are people who've been in that situation, so that there's going to be a trust, there's going to be a communication that is so natural that will really foster a successful result quickly, easily, and to the betterment, for the greater good for the whole community. So we're just about out of time. So I want to give you both a chance. Oh, and we didn't even say what. So we want to do this pilot program. So what we want people to do. So I want to give you each a turn, with especially focusing on what we'd like, how people can help. How can people help? So, Achol?
Of course, first, Colleen, I think you spoke very well on other programs. And I think it's really important for other people to know that there are alternatives, and there are successful alternatives, and that this is something that is not new and revolutionary. It can be done. It has been done, and it's been proven to be successful. So I think it was very important for you to speak on just the different ways in which it's been enforced before. So I think that's very wonderful that you were able to educate us on that. And then I also kind of forgot where the question was. But as far as
how people can help, how can people help?
So, so there's many ways that you can take action. Obviously, the first one is using your voting power, voting for people who for resourcing the community and acknowledging, people who are oppressed, BIPOC people, especially Indigenous people in America. I think that a lot of the times people ignore the plight of the Indigenous population. And with a lot of the girls and women that are going missing, like I think it's very important to want to acknowledge, just be aware of, when you're voting for people, like aware of the issues and being aware of what people's platforms are and where they stand on certain issues, especially with trans rights being, trans and LGBTQI rights being withdrawn, and with those laws being enforced to basically take away the rights of people to exist. And especially with even immigration in Florida, just when you're voting, be aware of what the problems are and the platform that the person that you're voting for, where they stand on those, because you're electing by electing and voting, those people are going to represent you. And you want to make sure that you're voting for people that represent your needs and know what your needs are. And that can be a valuable asset when they're making policy, so that they have you in mind. So one thing, using your voting power, know your politicians, always know your local representative, because it's not just on the presidential and the federal level, it's also on the local level as well. Especially there is the primary on Tuesday.
Yes.
So it's very important to go out and vote, especially
27th.
in this. Yes, on the 27th. So the first thing that you can do is vote for people who represent your needs and who you feel like will properly represent your community. There's also just having that understanding of who your legislators are. You can call your legislators. There are scripts that are available. You can email your representatives. You can promote the community responders team and just the need for it through social media and through conversations with friends. And I think just what we're doing now, just having conversations with people and letting people know that this is something that's going to happen. This is something that we have out here that we're trying to push, and we have a pilot program and we thought this out. So I just know your representatives, go vote, and have difficult conversations.
Thank you so much. And Colleen, just very briefly, because we have
Sure. So we have a
minute.
toolkit that you can use to take action. Also, it's at bit.ly, so bit.ly/CTA community responders for EC. So bit.ly CTA community responders for EC. If you go to that link, it'll take you to a toolkit where you can call and email your county legislator, County Executive Mark Poloncarz, and Mental Health Commissioner Mark O'Brien, and tell them to fund a pilot project. So that's what we're really going for right now, is funding for a pilot, which would be one team of 3 responders, a van, and all the other things that they would need to do this. And we'd like to get $500,000 towards that pilot by the end of the year, by the end of 2023. So if you go to that link, you can get the script to make the call. It's very easy, quick, just to call your representatives and send them an email. You can also sign up for our email list so that you can hear about our general body meetings and other updates. You can just email me, Colleen, Colleen, @ppgbuffalo.org, and I'll add you to our list so we can keep you looped in.
Great. Well, so we're hoping people will do all of that. It'll definitely be on the Western New York Peace Center website, and we'll have it on our Facebook page. Share it around. Ask them, talk about. We want a pilot program for community responders in Erie County. So I want to say it's been so great. I can't thank you both enough for being on the show. You both did such a beautiful job, doing wonderful work every day. So thank you so much. This is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much. That is a wrap. That is a wrap. Yeah, we had a minute and a half left. I like to live a little bit, not quite that, because they want to do station, but as long as
Yeah.
we're come in under an hour, we're good. So anyway, oh, and there's Richard. You can meet
Hi,
Richard.
Richard.
Hello.
Hey, Charles and Colleen.
Yes, Colleen, you're a wealth of knowledge.
Oh,
Well,
both
thanks.
of
You are
you.
too. I so appreciate being on with you. This is great.
Both of you did beautiful, beautiful job. I think it's a very strong show, and and we can share it. So Richard will be sending it out so that you can see,
Yay.
how to share it, and you can add on the Bitly with it or anything like that, and we'll be sure to get it up on the Western New York Peace Center. Make sure I have that. I think I do, right? It's got to be. It's in here. The Bitly.
The link, actually, the link was newly created, so I'll email it to
Yeah,
you.
actually, if you email it to me, Deidre, and Nicole, or just whichever ones of those is easy enough for you, because
Okay,
I'll make
yeah.
sure it gets out there. So
I have
meanwhile,
been meaning to
and
send out an email today, but I'll do it tomorrow.
yeah, no, not
everyone
to.
have a
Are
good-
you kidding? We've got you going till 10 o'clock at night. I so apologize. Between everything, it just takes the time it takes. But and actually, you would love our previous show because it was really strong on LGBTQ.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
there, well, I was starting to tell you a little about
Yeah,
that
there's a
trip,
lot going
trip
on
to
in this
Philly,
country.
free trip to Philly, if you want it. Anyway, I'm really so grateful to both of you. You both did such a beautiful job, very eloquent, very moving, and we're gonna get there. So
Yes.
thanks a jillion. Good night. Good night.
night. Thank you guys
Thanks
for
so
having
much.
me.
Big hugs and love. Thank you.
Bye, Richard.
Thanks.
All right, have a great night, everyone.
You too. You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye for now. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks so much. Okay. It's a wrap.
Are you familiar with the term feedback?
Uh-huh. Yep.
It's usually meant for sound,
Uh-huh.
but on the screen we have video feedback.
Oh,
Isn't that
uh-huh.
cool?
Yeah, it is cool. Looks a little bit like one of those fun mirrors or something. In a fun house kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like those were two very good, strong shows. Yep. Yep, Bird. So, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So that's my general plan is I'll be, I'm helping with, the shows just on the third. I'm helping a little bit with, the shows and that document, right?
What
The
document?
running planner. But I also, the main thing for me is the third show of the month, or the third week of the month, which when I plan to do 2 shows.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, so that's gonna be sort of the regular thing. Now, I did one the other day, so, it doesn't mean it can't happen. But generally, it'll be that I'll do the third, unless I switch it, like in August, I think I'll switch it
Yeah.
to like the second or the first Wednesday of the month.
Okay.
But when I do it, I'll try to do, you know, and what we might do is have, you know, have a show, the first show in person and the second show on video or something like that. We'll see.
Okay.
It just depends on who the guests are and how the weather is and, you know,
Okay.
whatever else is.
Was the temperature comfortable in this room?
It was a little warm at a certain point, but mostly fine.
Then you noticed I turned on the air conditioning.
Oh, is that what happened?
I noticed it too.
Because I was warm.
I noticed
warm
it was
and I
getting
thought,
warm.
Well, so be it, you know.
And then I thought, wait a minute, she took her shawl off. Maybe that's a sign she's warm.
Well, actually, that's why I didn't wear it, was because when I first got here, it was a little warm. And then I thought, well, I don't want to wear it. That's why I stayed in that chair. Because I wanted that background behind me,
Yeah.
especially for the Pride one.
Yeah.
So I don't have a rainbow type. Or I do
You
have
don't
one
have any
dress,
garments
actually.
with a rainbow motif?
Not really. I mean, I have one that's sort of like that.
Because
but
you
I do have a lot of
usually
colorful-
shop at very progressive stores, and you would think that they would have that.
Well, but I go for more ethnic than,
Ah,
you know what I mean? So, like, I have this, you know? I mean, I have lots of colors.
I know.
But I don't have a
noticed.
rainbow.
No.
You know, it's a different thing. So I have this, so that's what I used. I just put this behind me, this here thing.
Sure.
Somebody gave me this, which I love this, but
Right.
isn't that great?
Yeah.
But even that is not a rainbow, it's just what it is. But,
It,
but
looks,
anyway.
it
didn't
almost
really
looks
matter.
African.
I don't know where it comes from. It does have a little bit in African, but it actually, the differences are not that great. And actually, you know, this whole thing, you think that's African, right?
Yeah, I did.
It isn't.
South American.
From Indonesia. Indonesia.
little I know.
Originally, no, everybody thinks it's African because they started making them in Indonesia and sending them to Africa or something like that. I don't know how it happened, but that's what a person who is a buyer, who is from Rwanda, that's what she told me.
Oh.
That's what she told me. So, anyway, but I felt like we had two very strong shows today, and I really felt good about them. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York. Although one of the things I always feel is when somebody goes on, or if they're very repetitive, I always feel that this slight bit of impatience that, because I feel like it's my responsibility, but I want to be a good host and make people feel comfortable. But sometimes if it's sort of belaboring a point or sort of going on longer than the point needs, I start to feel a little anxious, you know, and especially I definitely start feeling anxious when it's at the end of the show and if we only have a minute and a half left, which is what we had.
Right.
So that's why I don't really,
That's why you got it in under the
I
wire.
would rather you started it off as like, you know
50.
what, it's the honest truth.
I can
Yeah,
do that.
Do this, so I'm glad we're talking about it. Start it with 57 minutes, have it,
No problem.
it's 50 or 58 or something.
Whatever you
So
want.
we have to build in
But you
that
gotta
extra.
remind me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll remind you.
Yeah.
Is, because I want to build in, because that is, I don't like to send it to him. I know he doesn't want less than 55 minutes.
Okay.
But I also know that he doesn't want 59 minutes, does he?
He says if it's under an hour, he's okay.
Okay. Well, maybe I shouldn't worry about it, because I don't want to,
Flames that way
if
up
they've
are
got
good.
time for the other things they do, then there's no
Bye
issue.
for
I
now.
just feel, I know they do other things, you know, but as long as it's under an hour, he doesn't care.
Right, that's
If it's
his limit.
58, he doesn't, at 59, it's no problem
No
still?
problem. But you gotta remember, we're putting an intro into the show. Did you know that?
What?
Every show we send to him, he sent me a little intro that I have to put on the show.
Mm-hmm. And how long is that?
Show number 1 is a minute.
Uh-huh,
Show number 2 is 10 seconds.
uh-huh. Well, I still think it would be good to at least put a minute, started at 59.
Okay.
Or something like that. I just feel like it just makes me anxious when we're coming up against the minute. If I know we've got an extra minute, so that even if we go right up to the buzzer
You know what's
is
good
going
about
off.
about this idea you had?
Yes.
Don't start it at 60. What's good about that is your guests are under the illusion that the show is going to end when it hits 0. So they're going to speed up, and they're going to make sure they get their final say in succinctly.
Well, fat chance of that. I wouldn't go that far. I don't get carried away here. But, yeah. No, I think, let's say a minute and a half. I need to be, but that's when I can't decide, then I like to decide something like that.
Okay.
So leave it, so and I'll remind you that it should be like a minute and a half.
Right.
So that I know that we're not gonna come up right against the hour, and hit an hour.
Right.
Because we could hit an hour, because people, you think they're looking at that clock? I don't think they are.
Oh, I thought they were.
Well, I don't think they are.
Oh.
Maybe some people are, but I'm
Oh.
gonna, I will bet you
Because
that
they
they're
can see
not.
it just as clearly as you
Well,
can.
they can see it just as clearly as me, but it doesn't mean they're paying attention to it. Because first of all, actually, when they were speaking, both of them, and I want to say especially in the second show,
Yeah.
they were, not that they weren't eloquent and not that they didn't say really great things, which they did. But I think that they were both a lot more nervous than some people are, because, well, Atchall hasn't been doing this all that long, so I think she was kind of nervous. I don't think she's been on a radio show before. And Colleen hasn't done a lot of that kind of thing. She's a researcher. So at times she'll speak, and she certainly knows her stuff, but she's not really, she's more of an introvert than an extrovert,
I see.
and I don't think, so for both of them, I think they were sort of, a little bit, how people are on the radio. And I've spent a lot of time on the radio now.
Yeah,
So that-
it's second nature to you.
Well, I don't feel, I still feel a little nervous, and it can throw me off a little bit. But there's a basic, I don't feel like way nervous, because I've just had so much radio time that it's just like,
Sure.
yeah. But they haven't, so that's why I'm saying, so that people's powers of observation go down.
Oh, when they're nervous, their
When they're
powers
nervous.
of observation
sure.
go down.
I'm sure, yeah, because you're worried, and they're thinking about what they're gonna say, when they're gonna say, whether, yeah. And trying to pay attention to what the other person is saying, too. So it's a lot to take in, so that, yeah, they aren't necessarily noticing that at all,
Mm-hmm.
to me. That depends on the person. Some of them might notice it more than I do. But I definitely notice it because of that, because I want to end it on a clean, nice thing
Right.
in time.
Right.
Anyway,
You
so,
want to have good closure.
yes. And did you hear either of the shows well enough to?
Oh, yeah, I just came down for the second show, and I noticed that you were striving for closure at the end.
Right, because they were, and because both of them, I noticed, were doing this thing of going on. You know what I mean? A little bit more. Not that other people did not, but sort of more so with repeating things,
Mm-hmm.
and going, because you know what it is? It's hard for people to stop talking. Once
And
they
I've
get
often
rolling.
wondered why that is. I've noticed that myself.
Because of closure, because it's just hard for people to stop, because they don't, it's just sort of, when you're nervous especially, it's just sort of, and especially if the thing's important to you, you keep coming back around, and you just keep going. And so, both of them, and especially Atchell, had a little bit of a trouble with stopping talking.
Mhm.
When you've already made your point, but you come back around. Because it's just like when you see somebody doing gymnastics, right? And they end like that. because they have a definite end and they're done. But nobody is, you're not, you know, you haven't said that paragraph before, so you don't have a set end, so you just keep talking because you don't know how to stop or where to make that point, like, I'm done,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. In fact, there's an interesting YouTube video called How to Make a Speech,
Uh-huh,
and it's, as the guy is giving the talk, he says, now everybody has trouble knowing how to end it when they're talking.
right,
He says, so what I do is I tell them, did you ever see an orchestra perform a symphony? And when they're done, the audience applauses, breaks out in applause, and the conductor, he puts down his baton, and he walks over and he shakes the hand of the first violinist. So he says, now in this speech there is no first violinist, so I'm going to shake the hand of the person in the first row and bid you all good night.
But here's the other thing, they've already stopped playing.
Right.
So the thing about stopping playing, so they've already accomplished their stopping.
Yeah.
Without the thing.
Yeah.
So the big thing is how to leave it in a good crescendo, and then the other thing is people don't know when you're done. And
Right.
also, if you're done, you've paused, but if somebody doesn't start talking and take a turn,
Yeah.
then you very well may start talking again because people are uncomfortable with silence.
Yeah.
So that thing about stopping. So, anyway, Richard, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, thank you. You know, yeah, we're grateful to you. And,
You are welcome.
it's a great service because I think those are two very good shows on two really important topics.
I will have figured out the Facebook problem the next time I see you.
Okay. Okay. And if
Just
you-
like I figured out that 60-second timer. I
Right.
figured that out.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, thanks so much.
Okay,
So we'll see you before long.
okay.
Okay, and probably in the third, as far as I know, the third Wednesday
Okay,
will be the time.
all right.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.